South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has unveiled plans to assist businesses caught up in the recent unrest in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. This assistance will also extend to SMMEs that have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic that impacted the country's economy. The president eased lockdown restrictions in an address to the nation on Sunday evening. The restrictions were imposed a month ago in an attempt to curb the spread of the deadly Delta variant of the coronavirus. He also announced the reinstatement of a monthly welfare grant of about 350 Rand for the poor until the end of March next year, along with a 400 million Rand state contribution to Humanitarian Relief Fund. This is made possible by a slight improvement in revenue collection. Ramaphosa said, "We are also implementing measures to help businesses to rebuild. The most immediate need is to ensure that those businesses that were damaged or looted are able to rebuild and reopen as quickly as possible." The president said that South Africa is one of the few countries in the world to have a state-owned insurance company, SASRIA, which provides cover against incidents of public violence, strikes, riots, and unrest. SASRIA has committed to expediting the payment of all valid claims and is working together with private insurers. Some businesses that were victims of the violence may not, unfortunately, have been insured. Today, we're looking at the tax implication of South Africa's unrest. I'm Tolulope Adeleru-Balogun. Welcome. This is Business Edge. Now, joining me from Johannesburg, South Africa, is Mandy. He is the PricewaterhouseCoopers Africa Tax Policy Leader. Kyle, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us on Business Edge. So let me start with this question. For many people, taxation is possibly one of the last things they think about when it comes to issues of civil unrest and how that can impact revenue collection and tax mobilization. So as we get started, can you just explain how unrest, such as the type that South Africa witnessed recently, affects taxes?
Well, it affects it on two levels. Firstly, there's the direct impacts that take place as a result of the losses that are incurred directly related to the unrest itself. So we see a loss from an income tax point of view as a result of those losses incurred by businesses and ultimately by the insurers concerned. That will impact income tax in the form of corporate tax collections. But there's also the impact that comes through from an indirect tax perspective, notably in respect of that. The bigger issue, however, ultimately boils down to the indirect tax impacts, which come from the ultimate effect on economic growth, on business and consumer confidence, and those knock-on effects that it has insofar as that's concerned, which could have a longer-term impact, if you like, insofar as revenue collections are concerned.
All right, so we know that the impact of the unrest is going to be felt for some time, and it's said to have affected critical sectors of South Africa's economy. By your estimation, how devastating has this particular situation been for the revenue generation drive of the South African government?
Look, it will have an immediate effect of a few billion Rand. It's difficult to place an exact estimate on the cost from a revenue perspective. But as I say, the potential effects are greater when you look at the medium-term to long-term impacts that it may have insofar as revenue collections are concerned. Ultimately, though, given that the unrest has largely come to an end at this point in time, and provided it doesn't continue or rear its head again, the effects are expected to be relatively small in the long run. So, we're probably looking at numbers in the region of a 10 billion Rand impact on revenues.
Now, some have said that the unrest did not, in fact, actually affect South Africa's economic rating on the continent. Do you agree with that? Even though, as you said, it is, of course, looking like it has come to an end. It was just a few days. But how much impact in terms of the country's economic rating could that unrest have had?
Well, it comes back to this question of whether the unrest becomes systemic or if it's a once-off. On a once-off basis, I don't think it will have an impact. I think those risks are already built into the models insofar as that's concerned. But if we start to see increased and ongoing unrest, then definitely it has to have an impact.
All right, so we saw for the economic growth forecast for South Africa, it rose to 4.9% in June from 4.3% in May. Of course, the unrest were just a few weeks ago in early July, as it would be. So we won't really know what the number is until we get the July numbers. But what are you expecting? How do you think this might affect the economic growth forecast for South Africa for the July ratings, for the July numbers, rather?
Well, certainly from a PwC point of view, we have reduced our estimates for growth moderately, not excessively. But you've got to bear in mind that that's impacted not only by the unrest, but also by the lockdowns as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic as well. So it's very difficult to actually to split the two out. But certainly in terms of our modelling, we've modelled it on the basis that there would be, in effect, we're modelling the unrest as an extended or expanded lockdown, if you like.
Okay.
And in that respect, what we've reduced our forecasts for economic growth to a moderate extent.
Okay, so let's talk about municipalities now. They typically generate more than about 80% of their operating revenues from fees for service provisions, the things that they provide for residents in their areas. Now, based on currently available information, very weak growth is also likely to result in a more marked decline in also their collection rate than previously expected. So is there any way out for municipalities in this conversation? Is there any way out for government tax collectors, or are we going to continue to see conversations around a possible increase in taxes to try to make up for what is a decline that we're going to experience?
Well, certainly the municipalities present a particular problem, and they have been presenting a problem for a number of years now with their financial positions deteriorating. Certainly, the impacts of COVID-19 have not assisted that. They've worsened the position insofar as that's concerned, and the unrest will do further damage insofar as that is concerned as well. Ultimately, the problem is that there's a systemic issue when it comes to local government in South Africa, and the solutions rely on long-term solutions rather than quick fixes. With structural changes needed insofar as the operation of those municipalities are concerned. A lot of it results from capacity challenges more than anything else. But until such time as those issues are remedied, the deterioration is going to continue. We have seen some good noises insofar as that is concerned over the last couple of weeks. And hopefully what we'll start to see some actions in terms of recapacitating those municipalities to get them on a sound footing.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the good noises. You call it good noise, and then we're waiting for the action. What are you hearing? Then we'll see if eventually we see some action that is commensurate with what we've heard.
Well, the biggest challenge with the municipalities is around skills and having the right people in the position for the particular jobs, and particularly at the high end. At the top end, insofar as executive mayors are concerned, as well as the municipal managers and those responsible for the finance functions. Those are the critical areas, and that's where we've seen, certainly over the last couple of weeks, suggestions made that we need to make sure that we've got the right people in those positions and not just there as political employees, if you like, which has certainly been the case in many instances over the last couple of decades. So if we can get that right, that will certainly be the first step in as I say, recapacitating those municipalities and getting them back on a sound footing. But there's a long path ahead. That would just be the first step.
So are there any concerns with the fact that some of these levies or the need to raise more money would likely be passed down to a consumer that has experienced a lockdown, that has had a cut in salary or even has lost a job? Because the numbers with unemployment as well in South Africa are over 30%, which is the highest since the country started taking that statistical data. We're also seeing that ratings downgrade as a result of the looting would likely also have a direct impact on the finances of municipalities that could then try to pass down the issue or pass the buck down to the consumer. How can that issue be addressed?
Well, I think the issue really is, although there are some challenges from a revenue point of view, there's no question about that, and the revenue base is under pressure because of the very factors that you mentioned and so on. But the real solution doesn't lie there. The solution lies more on the expenditure side when it comes to the municipalities, as it does for national government as well. The problem is that spending in many instances has not been efficient. There's been a great deal of corruption insofar as supply chains are concerned, including at a municipality level. And those are the issues where the bleeding really needs to be stemmed. And if they can sort that out, then there probably, to a large extent, is not a shortage of revenue. It's not a revenue problem. It's, the problem lies in terms of how funds are spent.
Okay, so Carl, let's hold on. We need to take a break here, but when we come back, we'll get into tax evaders. And there are those who are calling for tax evaders to be aggressively sought after to get the money back. And in terms of that, we'll also look at emergency funds and loans set up by the government in order to help recover from this unrest. This is Business Edge. We're looking at the tax implications of the recent unrest in South Africa. The conversation continues after this. Still with me on Business Edge from Johannesburg, South Africa, is Carl Mandy, PwC Africa Tax Policy Leader. Carl, let's get into tax evaders now. We've heard some financial analysts. They say this is the right time to aggressively go after tax evaders in order to recover funds, most especially those whose businesses are protected and maybe they did not suffer a heavy impact from the recent unrest and the looting. What do you think of this, given also that South Africa is said to be one of the countries, if not the country, with the highest socioeconomic gap in the world, and taxation is something that government has really been struggling with?
This is certainly, look, I do think it's unfortunate that it has been linked to providing relief. I don't think that was necessarily the ideal thing to do, albeit that it's clearly you can't provide fiscal support, if you like, to those who are not paying the taxes that they should be paying. The real problem, though, is that South Africa has a significant tax gap. Certainly, we estimate that to be in the region of 200 billion rand, or around about 4% of GDP, if you like, into that perspective. So we have a very significant tax gap in South Africa, and that gap needs to be closed. It comes from a number of different quarters, including illicit trade, which clearly would not qualify for relief in any event, but also in many respects, it's small and medium-sized businesses or privately owned businesses who are not paying their fair share. So, I certainly think it's only fair that those who are not paying taxes don't receive the relief, but ultimately, those two issues should be divorced, and those taxes need to be collected out one way or the other.
Okay, so it's interesting you separate that those who are not paying taxes should not get some form of relief, because we've heard that the president say that there is provision being made for an emergency fund or some kind of loan to run government operations and also give a tax relief to all or affected businesses pending the time insurance claims and capitalization are sorted. So you want to separate that. If you're a business that is paying tax, go and get your tax relief. But if you're a business that's not paying tax, then you're not entitled to the tax relief. I want to be very clear that that's what you're saying it should be done in this situation.
No, absolutely. There's no question that those who are not paying the taxes they should be paying should not be enjoying the relief, subject to them remedying their tax affairs. If they're prepared to do that, then certainly they should be qualified for the relief. But I think it's only right, as I say, that those who don't pay the taxes that are due do not enjoy the benefits that come from paying taxes. So insofar as this relief is concerned specifically.
So interestingly enough, there are some people who've said that in this particular situation, government should use those who have paid taxes, good tax-paying businesses, in the interim to help with those businesses that have not been able to pay taxes and help them get back on their feet. If we were to follow what you've said now in terms of keeping businesses that don't pay taxes out, doesn't that have a long-term, more negative effect? It might lead to higher unemployment, because if they can't get back on their feet, they may have to let go of people. They won't be able to provide or to sell for the community and provide services as they do. And in the long run, they still won't be paying any taxes. So how does that work out? Because it seems like a conversation between the devil and the deep blue sea.
Yes, as I say, it's more about those who maybe haven't paid the taxes they should have paid in the past, starting to rectify that position. And they certainly have the ability to reach agreement with the tax authorities in terms of how they will rectify their position over time and so on. But what you can't do is allow those who purposely have put themselves outside of the tax base to suddenly be alleviated, if you like, of that burden, but still enjoy the fruits that come from those who have paid taxes. So I do think you need to connect it to some extent, but it shouldn't be a case of saying purely that, well, if you just simply haven't paid your taxes in the past, you will not be able to enjoy the relief. As I say, the enjoyment of the relief must be conditional on you actually remedying, rectifying the non-compliance that has taken place in the past.
Okay, so let's talk about Sasria a little bit. And we had one of their, we had the MD on last week to talk about their role in helping businesses recover from this unrest. And so we're seeing a situation where Sasria is the only company that can cover this type of unrest in terms of insurance. And some taxpayers or some insurance policyholders in South Africa may not even know that they're covered by Sasria, because apparently it's automatic and there's all these third-party conversations. But if Sasria cover doesn't pay back 100% of the value of the stock that was destroyed or lost because of this, the taxpayer also can claim the difference as a deduction for tax. Can't you consider this a leeway for affected business owners, especially in the interim?
Certainly. Yeah, to that extent, there obviously is an element of relief that is provided to those businesses by being able to claim those losses, those uncovered losses, as a deduction for tax purposes. So if you like, in any event, to some extent, government does actually bear a portion of those losses through those deductions. So I think that's only right. I mean, it's an inevitable risk, certainly in terms of operating in a country such as South Africa, that you could see losses arising from the operation of business insofar as that's concerned. So yeah, it absolutely makes complete sense that would be the position.
All right, so there's also conversation around a taxpayer's financial year end occurring before the insurance claim is finalized, and then how that moves. But on a regular day, taxation confuses people. How much they should pay individually, how much they should pay as a business. This is an extraordinary circumstance for many people. Is there a way to simplify this system so that South African business owners and individuals can work through this and get the remuneration or get the reimbursement as needed? Because taxes on a normal day, people will run away from the conversation. How can we handle that? How can South Africa handle that?
Yeah, look at... at the risk of getting technical for the moment, one of the difficulties is that from a very technical position, you actually can't claim any loss that's actually insured up front. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, if the loss is insured, you're unable to claim the deduction, but by the same token, the actual insurance payout itself is not taxable. So it is neutral. But as you point out, you don't necessarily know what it is that you're going to be able to recover from insurance. Yeah. At that point in time. So look, it is something that could be remedied, if not from a purely legislative perspective, which I say technically is a problem, certainly from a practice perspective, in the sense of actually allowing those businesses concerned to claim the losses up front, but then to tax any insurance proceeds that follow down the line. That is probably the most pragmatic way of dealing with the problem.
And I like the fact that you mentioned legislation in this, because this is a really an enormous task ahead of South Africa, and as well as those who are involved in making sure the affected businesses are able to recover. As we said earlier, unemployment standing at over 30%. We don't need any more jobs lost in South Africa at this point as well, especially as the country is attempting to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. Do you think this is such a special circumstance that South Africa should be looking at tax policy adjustments in order to manage the impact of the looting on the economy and on businesses?
Look, there's no question that South Africa needs to re-look at its tax policy, and certainly the Treasury in South Africa has been doing that over the last couple of years, and does have a plan in terms of where they want tax policy to go. I don't think the unrest needs to derail their plan, and certainly Treasury yesterday indicated that they are sticking to that approach. And basically what it boils down to is about broadening the tax base, making the tax system more efficient, and ultimately lowering corporate tax rates in particular over time. And I think that's the right approach, and it's an approach they need to continue on. It will certainly make the tax system more conducive to growth and more investment friendly. And as I say, I don't think there's anything particular that needs to change insofar as that's concerned as a result of the unrest. I think they are on the right path insofar as that is concerned.
All right, Kyle, we'll pause the conversation here. We know that there's going to be further developments as a clearer picture in terms of insurance claims and other things come out in the coming weeks as well. So we look forward to having you back on Business Edge.
Pleasure. Thank you to you as well.
All right, thank you. And we've been speaking with Kyle Mandy. He's the PricewaterhouseCoopers Africa tax policy leader on the tax implications of South Africa's recent unrest. And many of us would not think of taxes when it comes to unrest, but there are widespread and indirect implications when such situations arise. And of course, we'll be touching base with many across South Africa as we look to see how this has impacted the country's economic growth and development. This is, of course, Business Edge. When we come back, we're going to give you the stories we're keeping our eyes on. NC4 to Watch is up next. So we're keeping our eyes on these stories, and we think you should watch out for them as well. Let's get started with NC4 to Watch. Number one on our list, American biotechnology company Didec International has joined the race to produce COVID-19 vaccines in Africa because the continent is the least vaccinated. The Jupiter, Florida-based company has announced a technology transfer and licensing deal with South Africa's Rubik Consortium, a newly formed group that includes Ramaphosa, a former Treasury General of the country's ruling African National Congress. Number two on the list, language learning app Duolingo Incorporated rose 36% in its trading debut after a $521 million initial public offering priced above a marketed range. Now, the company's shares closed at Wednesday at $139.01, giving the education technology company a market value above $5 billion. Accounting for employee stock options and restricted stock units, it is fully diluted value of more than $6 billion. South Africa's National Treasury says economic support package is required to deal with the negative economic impact of the recent disturbances. Now, Finance Minister Tito Mboweni gave assurances that the fiscal path earlier announced in the 2021 February budget will be maintained. He warned that South Africa's fiscal situation remains serious. The debt burden has surpassed 80% of the GDP, and it takes R1 out of every R5 raised in taxes to pay the cost of the debt. And finally, number four, the United Kingdom has announced that it will invest £35 million, about 5.2 billion Kenyan shillings, to develop Kenya's affordable green housing projects. Britain adds that it will make these investments through the UK Climate Investments and FSD Africa Investments, as well as UK Climate Investment and the British government's International Climate Finance Flagship Program. They've also committed £30 million as well. And we're seeing that the investment arm of Britain's flagship financial sector development agency has also committed £5 million to the Green Housing Initiative. And that's it on Business Edge. I'll be back 11 a.m. West African time on Friday for more business and financial savvy conversations from here on the continent. Follow us on all of our social media platforms. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss anything. Download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store so you take us with you wherever you go. I'm Tolulope Adeleru-Balogun. Do have a good one.